The moment that money or the market enters the picture, something happens to an artist. Most never see it coming. The golden thread, what I would consider the signal of their talent, their taste, and their vision, it slowly corrodes, and gradually, like so quietly, by the time they feel it, they've already been building from the wrong place for months. Like their signal got contorted and now it's changed direction. And sometimes it takes years for them to catch this. And you can watch it in real time if you know what to look for. It's someone who has this clear, expressive, almost iconic, and deeply connected way of being with what they were making. And they suddenly become hesitant, perfectly polished. Their decisions slow down. Their creation changes. The voice tightens. They begin second guessing things that used to just come instinctively. And from the outside, it actually looks like becoming more serious, becoming more strategic, or even more professional. But internally, for the soul of an artist, something else might be happening. It could be that they're no longer creating from the same place. They're trying to make their work legit, or I would even say behave. They're trying to make their work behave. And they're trying to shape it into something that can survive and be successful in a system that they may not fully understand. Even a world that they're not sure they want to participate in, but they feel like they have to. And in that process, they start stripping away the very thing that made them otherworldly, valuable in the first place. That is where most artists of all mediums quietly step away from their edge and start building something that looks like a business, but it feels nothing like their work. For many, business doesn't feel like an extension of their craft or their creativity. It feels like an entirely different domain, a world with its own language, its own power trips, its own rules, its own expectations. And the moment that an artist steps into that entrepreneurial or business world, they assume that they have to become someone else to succeed there. And so they'll start mining for everything that they don't know. They'll start listening to people who have no relationship with how they think or create. They'll start adopting frameworks or strategies that they see, but that were never designed for someone operating at their level of artistry or sensitivity or style. They begin forcing themselves into structures that may work mechanically, but they have no resonance with how they actually move. And over time, that disconnect creates a kind of internal contradiction, a divide. A part of them knows that their signal, that golden thread, is still there to create, but now it's being directed by a set of borrowed ideas, different kinds of voices lending their opinion about what the artist should or shouldn't do, how to succeed, how they need to market and sell, what they need to communicate, and what a business, a legit business, is supposed to look like. And the result is something that functions, but it feels hollow. I think of it as an animated golem. It looks like a human, it walks and talks like a human, but something about its soul is gone, hollow. It's something that generates, like it might even generate revenue, but it doesn't really express the consciousness behind it. And so an artist in this particular divide, they'll either push harder, learn more systems, operate by the business rules they think they have to keep, and they'll burn out, or they'll retreat back into pure creation and they'll avoid the problem entirely. And it's been my experience that neither path actually solves the issue, because business is a creative constraint. It doesn't have to be a compromise. At a certain level, the artist has to confront a reality that runs completely counter to how creativity is usually framed. And creativity, pure creativity, will try to convince you that it requires total freedom, that it thrives in wide open spaces without restriction, no pressure, without anything shaping it from the outside. But if you look closely at any artist who has built something enduring, you'll see the opposite. Their work is not undefined. It is shaped, it is structured, and it exists inside constraints that force it to become more precise. That is where the golden thread doesn't break. It refines, it sharpens. Business, when it's understood correctly, becomes one of those constraints. It doesn't exist to limit the work. Business is the playground for the artist's soul's greatest expression. When an artist steps into an entrepreneurial domain, the business operates. It exists to give form to the consciousness of the art in the world, and so it creates boundaries over how the work moves, how it's delivered, how it reaches people, how it sustains itself over time. And when an artist stops seeing business as something that threatens their expression and starts seeing it like a medium that they can shape, everything can change. The same level of creativity and mastery and intensity and curiosity and wonder that they apply to their craft can now be applied to how that craft lives and breathes and evolves in the reality of the business world. I want to share a framework with you to show you this paradigm. Think about concentric circles. In one circle, we have the craft. We would call that, the art, but I'm going to call it the craft, and you'll see why. That is your area. If you're an artist, it's your area of mastery. So it could be movement, it could be painting, it could be writing, whatever have you. It's your area, right? So that's the craft. Then over here, you have like a concentric circle of business. This is the world of commerce, of revenue, of price setting, of marketing, of conversion. You get my point. So you have these two circles, right? And then you have the circle of you. So this is the way that you operate in your own life, your own rhythms, your cycles, what fuels you, what drains you, how you conduct yourself, your loved ones, and that's the third concentric circle. So now we have 3. And just picture them, instead of being segmented, which is how the mainstream wants you to see them, I want you to bring them together where they merge into an overlap, And that overlap is exactly specifically who I'm talking to today, where what you do, your craft, who you are and how you live your life, and also your command and curiosity and tenacity to succeed in business. That overlap is you. Now I want you to look at drawing a giant circle all around it, all around, that hugs all 3. That is art. We name that circle as art. When we look at ourselves, our life, our craft, and our entrepreneurial success in that way, we're seeing it more appropriately as an ecosystem. And so everything, every piece, every connection in an ecosystem serves a purpose. It fuels the whole. One of the clearest places the ecosystem might show up, that paradigm might show up, is how artists think about what they sell. This covers money, but it also covers ideal audience, how you approach them, how they approach you, closing rates, the whole thing. And I think the common approach is to approach sales in fragments. So it's like a product here, like a service over here, something improvised when they need income, something abandoned if it doesn't immediately work. There's nothing wrong with operating in that way, but over time it will fuel a feast or famine kind of paradigm. Maybe that sounds familiar. Because when we segment it all and it's all fragmented, the whole is not operating like an ecosystem. So there's no continuity, there's no architecture. There's no sense that any piece is serving something larger. I have a side rule of thumb that everything in my business or my art must do more than one thing. And that's just an honesty for me to continue to honor the connectivity, the parts, and how they fuel the whole. So if you step back and you actually look at a beautifully functioning business through an artistic lens, that is where you can see the patterns of an ecosystem. So every offer has a role. Every entry point of how people find you, it connects to something deeper. You could see it as a web instead of a funnel, right? Or a flywheel. But there's a natural progression that allows someone to move from first contact with you into your world and then into a more intimate relationship with your work, your lens, your voice, and the impact of your work. This isn't about building more like a conveyor belt of a factory. It's about building with intent, with even intimacy, understanding how your work can exist at different levels of depth and access, and then creating pathways that allow people to move through the world of you, of your work, those levels without friction. When that system is coherent, and it may take months, it may take years, right? But when that system is coherent, all operating as one, you're no longer relying on constant output to survive. The work begins to take on a life of its own, to really support itself. I want to cover just briefly one of my favorite topics. I love sales, and I love sales as an artist. I love sales as someone who believes that sales is a conversation, a connection point between two people. It's not something that you do to someone and then try to get them to do what you want them to do, right? So sales is another area where artists, creatives, they tend to distort because they might associate it with a used car salesman or a sleazy experience, or even associate it with a performance or persuasion. So it feels like stepping outside of the work and then trying to convince someone of its value or talk them into something that you're afraid they don't want to do. And that immediately creates resistance if you're a decent human being. And so in my work with entrepreneurs, I've called this there's the yum, which is all of the art and work and creativity and all the good parts. And then they'll have the yuck, and they'll see them as completely different lanes. And they might put sales and money and revenue and pricing all in the yuck category. And it's like, how do I stomach the yuck so that I can do more of the yum? And one of my favorite things is to play with, what we consider pain and pleasure, or desire and aversion, and really see them as one and the same. Because when the work is real to you, and then you see that sales can become something much simpler, much more precise, an art in and of itself that you can shape in a way that works and also feels great. It becomes an extension of the same clarity, the same consciousness, the golden thread that created your work in the first place. And so you're not adding anything to it, You're removing everything that obscures it. You're articulating what it is, who it's for, why it matters in a way that allows the right people to recognize themselves inside of it. And there's no need to inflate it or manipulate perception because the signal, the consciousness of the artist is already there. When artists understand this, sales stops feeling like a separate skill and it starts feeling like part of the same expression. This brings me to a sidebar, so consider this bonus sauce. Every offer in your business, every way that you deliver your craft, every touch point, the way someone feels when they're led into your world and then throughout it, all of that is a part of the art, and it holds a consciousness of the artist that created it. So think about a time when you were sold something, approached in a way that felt like a yuck. Notice what happened in those moments for you, what you didn't like. Also, have you ever encountered somebody's marketing and it looks awesome, and then you meet them and then it's like, ooh, something's not the same about that, right? So that's what I mean. Like, it's all, because I'm a musician, I'll use this metaphor. It's all like a symphony. So each part is playing part of the whole, but it's all feeding from the same signal, the same consciousness. This will lead me into marketing as your expression. I think of marketing as an answer to someone's unspoken prayer. So think about your people, your audience out there, your customers, and they're existing in their life. They bring a whole context with them. And there are some of them who are just wishing for a you to exist. And when you are generous enough to share your energy, your voice, your image, your message as marketing, they can see and recognize you. And there's this like, there you are. I've been looking for you. That's resonance, and that's marketing as expression. Marketing is a funny one for creatives because I have found that even the ones who have public art, many times when it comes to marketing, they either disappear or they completely lose themselves. They get guarded or weird or just funny about it because it feels like the place where they have to conform the most. And I've done this too. I used to call it the performing animal, where I was averse to marketing and I made it sound really good. I don't have to, I shouldn't have to, people can just find me when they find me. And you know, that actually did happen. I tend to be a professional enigma, but the downside is that was actually coming from a misunderstanding that marketing was somehow this polished version, when really it was just an opportunity for people that I have never met to hear from me, to see me, to feel something about my energy and perspective. And then for me to make sure that they know the inroads, to lean in, to find me, to work with us, to step into the worlds that we've created, including the prestige. The problem is when an artist sees marketing as a part of the machine, something other than them expressing, then they will look at what's working, what's trending, what's getting attention, and they'll try to reverse their way into it, right? Nothing wrong with that approach, but the only challenge of that is that it disconnects them from the very thing that makes their work distinct, which is them. So instead of amplifying their signal, they dilute it. It contorts. When marketing is understood from a place of artistic consciousness, it becomes the ongoing expression of your perspective. It's not separate from your work. It's the way that your work speaks over time, the space that it takes up. It's how your own evolution becomes visible. And I do hope you're evolving, and I do hope your messaging and your marketing is evolving, because that's how people come into relationship with not just what you make or what you do, but how you see. This will require consistency, but not in the way that most people think, because it's not about repeating the same thing at the same time each day. It's about staying in contact with your own edge, with your own signal, and then allowing that to be seen in real time. And it'll take you being able to stomach some pressure. Pressure is inevitable in this whole world, by the way. And if you've listened to any of our other videos, you know we talk about pressure a lot. Because here's the thing, the artists of the world, the visionaries, and then anyone else, we all fall into one of four patterns under pressure. We'll take the shape of a warrior, a shapeshifter, a sage, or an asset. And these are not personality types. And if you've studied, Carl Jung or other archetypes, they're not that either. They are somatic patterns, the way your nervous system shapes and then sees and then expresses. And so knowing your pattern implicitly, like how you break down under pressure, your patterns, how you explain to yourself, the excuses that you make, the strengths that you have. I mean, why would you not want to have that at your command? Because then you can bring it into the way you express your art, your sales, and your marketing. I digress. But before I do, you can take that Somatic Skins Quiz is what we call it, and you can see how you break down under pressure, how you express at your best, your innate genius. It's a quiz down in the description below. I want you to have it. All right, so that's a good segue, because then I'm coming back into identity shift and your psychotecture. Because none of this works. The golden thread, the way you design offers or your work, mastering business as art, sales, marketing, none of that works if the identity of the artist underneath stays the same. There are beliefs that many artists quietly carry that limit what they allow themselves to build. And I want to say that a belief, if you think of a limiting belief as, oh, this is my limiting belief, it's not that. It may be like, a kind of a mind trash thought, but a true limiting belief is not seen as a belief. It is wired through the body as story, and 9 times out of 10, unless you have very high metacognition or you've trained this shit, you will experience a true but limiting belief as this is just how it is, or this is just how I am. Those are the beliefs that will quietly limit what you can build. These might be beliefs like you're not a leader, you don't believe in leadership, rather than seeing that leadership can be a part of your creative medium, the way that you lead, the expression of you as a leader. You get to make that shit up. You might believe that money is secondary. You don't do it for money, right? And maybe you don't. Maybe that's not your primary motivator. It isn't mine. But to say that money is secondary is almost like putting it on the back burner. And I have just seen when that belief is in the identity of an artist, more times than not, they will struggle deeply financially. And they will continue to give and give and give and create and say thank you for poorly paid opportunities instead of rising to the stature of a prosperous artist the way that they're meant to. You might have a belief that business is something separate than what you care about. We've covered that one. You might believe that people don't want what you have, or that your ideal audience is really hard to find. Regardless of the thought, these aren't just thoughts. They are paradigms. They're a world that you're creating, and they shape your behavior in ways that keeps your system safe and small. So at some point, those identities have to be examined and they have to be released. And they don't have to be done in a way that strips the artist, but they need to be done in a way that expands what you as an artist is capable of holding. The word I like to use is range. And when you develop full range, command of everything that you are, all of your identities, that is where the work can become powerful and internally driven again, because then you're not just shaping what you make, you're shaping who you are. You're shaping the structure that makes it possible. You feel the expansion with me? Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't feel like a loss at times. Whenever we switch identities, we actually have a principle. We have a few principles in the substrate, which is our training tenets for training what we call the fierce creator or the grand formidable. And one of the tenets is the law of sacrifice. It has somatic practices with it. It's a whole thing. It's found in the book, link below, Becoming the Grand Formidable. But all of this to say, whenever you switch identities, beliefs, paradigms, it might feel like a loss sometimes because parts of you that felt true are being outgrown. There's a real sense of disorientation that comes with that, and a sense that you're stepping away from something familiar without fully knowing what you're becoming. You feel that with me? I'm going to say it again. There's a sense of disorientation, like descent and dismembering. When you step away from what made you, what was familiar, and you don't yet have full knowledge or command of what you're becoming. There's an in-between, like caterpillar goo. But what's actually happening is that you're increasing your range. You're not becoming less of an artist. You're becoming someone who can operate at multiple levels without losing coherence. That's cool. This is amplified right now. The need for an artist to develop range and full command, to succeed wildly in the world of commerce as well as the world of creativity, and then to live their life as a work of art. This is more essential than ever, and I'm so flipping passionate about it because we are in an age of machine acceleration. AI is here. It's here to stay. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of slop being touted as art. There's a lot of artists who kind of abandoned their creative signal to allow the robot to maybe do it better, faster, and try to keep up. And there's like a final distortion happening. So I want to speak to this because that layer that artists are now being asked to navigate, they're given a bunch of tools, the presence of tools, including AI of all types that can replicate form without ever touching the source of the signal itself. An artist is not their medium. An artist is how they see, how they express, and that's the source. So for many, when they take the connection to their source and they use AI just to replicate form, this creates a new kind of fear and it sits underneath everything else. They might have a belief, or they might question whether what they do will be replaced, whether their voice can be simulated, whether the value of what they offer is being eroded. And there might be some truth to that. But my point is, depending on how they relate to AI, it either becomes a source of contraction or aversion or upset or fear, or it becomes another creative constraint they can work with. You see? Even that is the art. And how they relate to AI and tech is art. It's all art. The difference is in whether they can stay connected, whether you can stay connected to your signal. Because that's the one thing, that can't actually be replicated is the living integration, the consciousness behind the work. the perspective that comes from actually inhabiting what you're expressing. So tools, including AI and anything else, they can generate output, but they cannot generate authorship, not really. And you can spot it. The moment an artist starts outsourcing their signal, they collapse into the same field as everything else, and that's what we're seeing with the AI swamp. Okay. Thanks for going with me on this. If you don't take anything away at all, except for this is what I want you to take away. It's time for the death of the safe artist. At the end of all of this, there's a version of you as an artist that cannot continue if real growth is the goal. There is a version of you that will want to stay within what's proven, the work that built you. There's the version of you that wants to avoid friction or business, the yuck, the sales, the marketing, the exposure, the AI. There's a version of you that wants to keep the work contained, explainable, so that it remains acceptable and predictable and celebrated. That version of you and your work will feel stable, but it cannot evolve. It becomes stagnant. You, the artist who builds something real in the world, is the you who allows that old version, the stagnancy, the old beliefs and identities to end, and to become willing to move into uncertainty, to take responsibility for shaping both the work, both you as the consciousness of the artist and the structure that carries it, and to do it without abandoning the core of what makes the work yours. This is not about becoming someone else. It's about removing everything that keeps the golden thread from running all the way through, from first idea all the way to how it lives in the world. One of my favorite stories is the story of the Golden Buddha. I have no idea whether it's true, but essentially when the temples were being ransacked during a wartime in Asia, a monastery far in the mountains had a Golden Buddha. And they heard the report from the messengers that the looters were coming. And so they couldn't move the statue, it's too heavy. And so they covered it with dung. They just carted carts and carts of dung and just heaped it on top. And when the looters left and wartime ended and peace came, people were excavating and they found this Golden Buddha hidden under layers of shit. And I love that story when we talk about the golden thread of the artist, because isn't that true? We have this golden thread of expression, the essence of you, not personality, something deeper and truer and more potent and powerful. But then we start glopping on a bunch of ick, beliefs that we have, messages that we've received, all of the shit that complicates it all. And then because we're humans, we do something even weirder, which is we take cheap gold spray paint and we spray all over it, and we think that is what makes it look good. But it's spray paint over poop, you know? But when we strip away all those ideas, when we take away all of those false identities, when we put ourselves in an environment that trains connection to the signal, the power of the artist, we strip all that away and we come back to the golden core. That's the work. So, all that to say, if you followed all of this through today's message around the safe artist and maybe even the full series of the artist in the arena, then you can probably start to feel what it is I'm talking about. Your work is not the problem. Your creativity is not the problem. Here's the real invitation. Step into the work. Become willing to build the capacity to hold all of you, all of the work, all that it can become, the clarity to express it, the structure to sustain it without letting the system you operate in define what it becomes. Because the moment that you can do that, you're no longer negotiating with your potential, you're directing it. Now, at our next event, it's called Dirty Yes, Dirty No, but really it's going to serve the true artist. And we tend to keep these events pretty close to the chest. We don't explain too much because we want members to step into them relatively pure and have the experience. But I'll say, if you resonate with this series, this way of looking at you, your work, the business as art, and you are hell-bent on finding, holding, training, refining, amplifying the golden thread, you simply just must experience this event with us. Reach out to us directly. I'll make sure the link to contact us is in the chat below. Generally, events are for members only, but if you really, really resonate with this, reach out and I'll have a convo with you about potentially joining us for this event. See you there.